Hello, I'm retired Battalion Chief Larry Cockman from the Greensboro, North Carolina Fire Department History Book Committee. We're here today at the Greensboro Historical Museum. I'm standing in front of the General Greene, the first steam pumper, or as they called it back then, the steamer. Today, December 9th, 2019, we are starting a new tradition of recording and preserving the heritage and culture of our retirees. Our retirees have contributed so much to the success of our great fire department. Their stories retire with them and are sometimes gone forever when they pass away. They will share their emergency calls that will always be a part of their memories forever. So sit back and listen as they carry us through their journey in the Greensboro Fire Department.
My name is Danny Nelson. I'm 73 years old. I joined the fire department on August the 1st of 1969, and I retired August the 1st of 1999 with 30 full years of service. And I retired as a captain on what was then Station number 16, which had a task force, a Air Resource Task Force, which was a pumper, an air unit, and a squad that was responsible for it. I grew up on first 8 years was on New Garden Road, close to Battleground New Garden Road, and we moved to Summerfield, what we call Summerfield, in 1954, and that's where I'm at now, but I did do like a 12-year time frame in Kernersville and moved back to my home place. I do have relatives on the fire department now. Some of them are like distant cousins. Formerly, Robert Cood is first cousin. Charlie Saunders is first cousin. So I had some on my father's side and my mother's side that was related to me. Before I joined the fire department, started out cooking hamburgers and pizza at a place called Leo's Take Home on Battleground, right beside Made Right Sandwich. And from there, to get a different job, I went to Sears and Roebuck mail order. Worked there on night shift, and it didn't work with my schedule being young. So I took a job at $1.35 an hour, about a 30-some cent cut, to go to Newman Machine, which I worked a day shift. And I was working there, and Uncle Sam called me to duty, and I had just got married. This was married in 1968 to my wife, Rebecca. And in 1967, September, I got a letter that said, "Greetings, you have been selected." And from there, I went through, I was drafted and took my basic training in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and my advanced training in Fort Bliss, Texas on Dusters and Quad 50s, which was twin 40mm guns. Each round was equal to hand grenade, fired 240 rounds a minute, and then it was 450 caliber machine guns on the quad that fired 2,000 rounds a minute. So I was being trained to go to Vietnam for anti-personnel that they used it on at that time. I did not go by myself. Jesus carried me all the way, and I got reassigned, one of almost unbelievable reassignment to a searchlight battery. And didn't even know how to turn a searchlight on. And not only that, still was subject to go to remote bad positions, but I ended up, because of my farm, growing up on a farm and tractors and all this, I was asked if I could drive a Jeep, so I ended up driving a Jeep for 13 months, sleeping in a nice bed with a mosquito net and a fan blowing on top of me. And in Vietnam, inside of a Marine compound that had guard towers and lights around in concertina wire, so I had a very good assignment. And that's a story in itself, but we'll talk fire department here instead of military. I had never even desired or thought about the fire department in itself, and a good friend of mine, when I came back from Vietnam, he had gotten on the fire department. His cousin was on at the time, which was Jimmy Turner, and Jimmy Turner's cousin was Joe Anderson. And Joe and myself grew up together, and he was a very good friend. He was on duty, and he told me I ought to look at trying to get on the fire department. And back then it was a work 1 day on and 1 day off with a Kelly day every 10 days. And you didn't have to go through all the procedures they do now. You go down, put in an application, and Chief Ariel Powell was deputy chief at the time. And every day or every other day I would call him and ask him if he had anything open. And on August the 1st, when I called him, he told me to come on down. And that I had returned to Newman Machine and had got her all the way to $1.65 at that time. So my starting salary would, I left Newman Machine at, like I said, $1.65 an hour and working 40 hours a week with a buzzer that told you when you take a break. Chief Powell told me to come on down. I came down, and my starting salary was $441 a month. My first check was, I cleared $198, and I thought I had hit the big times. We had 9 people in my class at the time, and I do have a photograph of that class and everything. It was the 19th training class. It was 9 people, and actually Mike Burke and myself came on and was hired the same day. And back then they'd hire people until they got a training class. So the 2 of us was actually hired, and then we waited till January of 1970 is when they actually started the 19th training class with 7 additional people. Even to this day, I like to drop in a station, or I'll see somebody out that don't even know me or whatever, and there's a camaraderie that you can't get away from. And I've got friends that I've never known. Let me put it that way. That's the way I feel anyway. It's a camaraderie that you. I do remember some of the people in the training class. Jerry Toombs was one of them, and Gary Church. I went through training with him, and his son's also on the fire department now. I think Mike Burke. Like I say, I come on with him. I don't remember exactly what happened to Mike, but we trained together. But I didn't really work that much with any of them. For the most part, even though I knew them, but I didn't work with any of them years later on my shift. When I came out of training, or the day that I was hired, I went to Old Central Station. I worked till 6 o'clock, and I was reassigned or sent to Station 9 out on Friendly, and Mike Burke stayed. So I've experienced. Ended up back at Station 1 and everything, but. While I was at Station 9, Jack Nugent was my first captain, and they called him Tiny Wagner was the driver, and Tiny was on a 1949 85-foot American LaFrance ladder truck. We also had a water tanker out there and engine 9. I was on truck 3 that was at Station 9, and I stayed there from August the 2nd of '69 till sometime the second week of December is when I got my first actual fire call. And it was that prior to that, I had got my first Kelly day off after working 10 days. That's a day when because of the hours, you work like 66 hours a week or something, and you would accumulate, so they give you a day off to stay within that hour time. And my first Kelly day, my station had the first fire call that I would actually went on, and it was George C. Brown Fire over on Lee Street, and I was off duty that day, so I missed my first big fire. But I did go over there to see what a fire looked like, and I walked in, and Tiny Wagner was there, and he asked me what I was doing there, and I said I wanted to see what a fire was, and he said, "You're on your Kelly day, you're off, get in your car and go home." And I did exactly what I was instructed to do. And then I came back to work, and then it was December before I first went on my actual fire call, and it was really, I don't even know whether it's fire related, so I do not remember that particular fire call. Some of my biggest fires was probably one of the first ones, and it was Vic Chemical that was on what is Wendover Avenue right now at Latham Park, and it was a big fire. We actually had water running out of the dock doors, which haven't put so much water on it. Another one that comes to mind was the Gifford Bonded Warehouse fire. And of course, I was on the Davie Street fire later years, and that was after I got promoted to captain at stations, what was in City 17. That's pretty much some of the big ones that I remember right off. One other one would be the Carolina Theater. I was actually on that, and there's actually some, in the history book, there's some pictures, and I got one picture, and if I remember correctly, it was Stan Stafford that got injured in the balcony up there, and I actually helped to get him out and everything, and there's a picture of that, and they had one fatality there, and it was a challenging fire, let me put it that way. And another one after I got promoted to captain that I remember is, it was before I started riding acting chief a whole lot for Mr. Cockman, or Chief Cockman, but I was pulled from station newly annexed in City 17 as captain, and they told me I could not ride as an acting chief, only certain ones could, and I was pulled back to, right after that, after over a year as captain, I got pulled back to Station 1, and my first day there with no training whatsoever, I was appointed or placed in car 2, and I tried to go through the procedures, and while I was delivering some of the mail, I got Battalion 2 got a call, and it was the Gifford Courthouse, the old Gifford Courthouse, and it was a column of smoke that was bellowing up over to Greensboro. And being inexperienced at riding chief, I knew one thing, and I called for a second alarm, so we had a whale of a bunch of fire trucks coming, and I actually, the call, I handled the whole thing. We started the incident command system, which typically the chief will come back and ask you what you had, and then he'll take over, and that did not happen. I handled the whole fire call, and from one end to the other, and my biggest challenge on that was the news media with the cameras in my face. So I did ask one question to the chiefs, what do I do about these news cameras, and they said, wait till it's over, get it together, tell them what you had, and by that time it was old news, and I didn't have that situation anyway. Most people now, even though my initials are DB, most people just call me DB. I have been called, a high school friend called me Brute. One of the pranks that was pulled on me in particular that I still remember, and I'll go ahead and name names. I was at station number 7, and I had gone through the military, and at that point I don't know my age, but I've been on the fire department a pretty good while. I was, I guess, second driver, working with Kyle Stewart and Danny Shoemate, and they were on a ladder truck over there, and Paul Brooks was a new rookie there. And we did everything together. We cooked together, we cleaned together, we made our beds together, and we went to bed at the same time. That was pretty much a given back then. And we went to go to bed, and Shoemate and myself got in the bed at the same time, and when we slid down, our feet down in under the covers, the sheet didn't go but halfway. And we looked at each other, and I had never been short-sheeted through all my life, and Paul Brooks was the one that short-sheeted us. And he did not have a good night at the fire station that night. And he is very talented on his words and writings and all that. And somewhere around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, after he had lost his bed, no place to sleep, all of his clothes had disappeared, and he was in his quick hitch, which was ready to get on the truck. And he had to sleep on the floor that night, what he had left. He came over beside my bed and pulled a chair over there, and he did one of the longest and best apologies I have ever heard. And when he got through with it, I listened intently, and when he got through, I told him, I said, I will accept apology if my buddy over there does it. So he picked up the chair, he moved it over beside Shoemate's bed, and almost like a recording, he repeated everything that he had said to me. And when he got through with it, Shoemake told him, said, my buddy didn't accept the apology and I'm not going to either. So there's a funny story that went, and that still is on record at this day. I had just come on, and the union, I was still on probation. Back then you had 1 year probation. They could dismiss you for any reason, and not being experienced with the fire department, but the union become very active, and they actually went to a slowdown, and I jumped on board. So we did have a slowdown. We only did fire calls or whatever, and that's pretty much the most participation that I did doing it. Later I got it, you know, I didn't rejoin the union thing, even though I did support it. Well, to do everything together, because I feel that there is, just like military, there's a pecking order, and we've got each other's backs, and that builds camaraderie, it builds trust. When you work together, you'll fight fire together, and you know who will come in and take care of you when it's all over. So yes, I think that's a very critical and important part of doing things together, and it's better to work as a group than it is as an individual. As far as fire service today, I can't speak too much to it, but like I say, I do stop in some stations, and I did it, as a matter of fact, a couple of days ago, and one of the which is a captain now, and he kind of told me that it was a long way from what we knew it as, and now it's more like a business than it was then. We used to actually, back then, sit around and wait for a fire call after we did our duties. We'd play cards and checkers and wait for a fire call, and like I said, I waited till from August to December to get my first one. And now it's the same station that I've had. I can't even begin to comprehend the amount of calls they get out of these stations I used to. When I cooked, and I'll tell this story right quick, it was over at Station 7, and my wife, I think we could have started a restaurant. She's a very talented cook, and she had some stuff that she called stuff. Stuff. She called it stuff, and she came up with this recipe herself. And Kyle Stewart and Shoemake, and I think the trunk company was all over there then. I can't remember. I know Paul Brown was one of our captains and all that. But anyway, generally the engine would cook one week and the truck company next week. But it was my day to cook, and I decided that I want to cook this stuff. And I called her and got the recipe, went to the grocery store, got everything, come back, and these guys said, I'm not eating that mess, is what it amounts to. And I proceeded, because that was a daily meal, and it was almost, when I did do it, they was like hogs at a trough, and it was none of it thrown away. I do remember that. And after that, I cooked it pretty regular. It was almost like somewhat like a hamburger helper type thing, and I can't remember all the ingredients, but after that, she did cream potatoes on top of the meat and everything, and then melted the cheese and everything and poured over it. It didn't look very good, but it was very delicious. And my hat's off to my wife to this day for that. My opinion on dorms versus cubicles is, I think it goes along with the camaraderie. You know, you live together, you go in fires together, you fight together, you get to know each other better when you got an open dormitory. I know the ladies come along and it kind of separated that, and that's probably one of the reasons they do have individual now. But I'm not sure you get the same camaraderie, because there was a lot of, I guess, little pranks or tricks that went on, and it's like I said, as far as doing the trucks and making the beds and all together, you work together, and when you're in an open situation, and that, of course, I'm old school, but that's kind of the way I look at that. As far as having your own cubicle, I guess the only thing is privacy, and that don't work with camaraderie. When I go in a station now just to visit and everything, then of course I usually don't find maybe one person occasionally or two that was there when I left, and some of them is getting close to retirement now, but I don't see I see the companies there, but as far as working together and everything, I don't see the closeness that we used to have. I think that's kind of maybe gone away, maybe because it's more of a business type thing now. They got a job to do and they carry it out, but when we did it, we waited for a fire call. I can tell you that. That's how much I enjoyed it. So, as far as the cell phones and modern technology, I went through, when I first came on, there was 2 radio communications, and one of them was at the base station in the station. As a matter of fact, the lights in the old station 1 and the bells would wake you up for a fire call. But when I got to an outside station, it was a base set, and there was one radio on the truck that the captain had to, once you got to the fire call, he assessed it and he had to go back to the truck to call back to communications. And now I think a lot of the cell phones and everything, what I see, I can't help but to believe they're pretty much like they are when you go to a restaurant. You know, most people are looking at cell phones, even firefighters, a whole lot. And I think that social media and everything else probably plays a lot of, in today's firefighting, police, it don't make no difference. Every facet of life is affected by it. It does cut down on camaraderie because back then we played checkers and cards and such as that, or pool, or football. That's some of the things that I remember, and you did it together. And like just like a restaurant, I think the firefighters probably the same thing. They go in their cubicle and they're entertained by what they see on Facebook or whatever, rather than the camaraderie that's, to me, would be important as being a fellow firefighter. As far as going to stations and meeting people that you don't know, I can tell you this, even today when I visit a station, I think a lot of them do. The first thing, they're professional, they ask, can I help you? And then generally, I think I've left somewhat of a legacy at the stations. When I tell them my name, they come to life most of the time. And there's usually stories to be shared or stories they've heard or whatever, and that kind of gives me some satisfaction. Like I say, some of them may not be as good as others, but most of the time, if they don't stay around long, it's because they get a fire call while I'm standing there. But most of them would pretty much eagerly participate once I get there or whatever, as far as a conversation. I think it's a good thing. It's camaraderie again. It's camaraderie. Really? However you do it, it's respect and camaraderie maybe put together. I can tell you the big fires and such as that, but I was probably so excited to finally get one, and it was actually logged in Truck 3's log book back then that Nelson got his first fire call. And actually at that time I was working with Captain Jack Nugent and I think Captain Hartsick was the name or whatever. And actually back then it was a challenge. The big challenge then, as I remember, was on the trucks, was which truck gets back from the fire call first and gets back in the station. And I actually endured some of that. And I was driving the truck and I actually got chewed out by the captain because I was waiting on Friendly Avenue to make a turn, and I had oncoming traffic along with the truck company coming from a different direction. So I allowed the truck company to turn in the station before me, and the captain got all over me because he told me to turn, and I used my driving judgment and did not. We started in the medical and everything. It was when the squad was actually implemented, and I was on then. And one situation I can relate back to was actually at old Station 3 on Yanceyville Street, and Buffalo Lake. It was a real hard freeze, and the lakes was frozen over, and we had two 18-year-old guys that was walking on the ice, and they fell through. And we responded as an engine company with the squad coming later, and that was kind of medical. One of them got out and got help, and when we got there, this guy was about 100 feet from shore. We couldn't get close to him, and myself and which was later Captain Bill Smith, the two of us was on the company at the time. I was driver and he was second driver, and we went out into the freezing water up to our necks. and we took a pike pole and tied a rope to it and speared it across the ice and got to him, and he wrapped around it, and actually the squad arrived after that, and they pulled a rope once the guy got hold, and they slid him across the ice like a hockey puck, and he went right across the two of us. So we got doused all the way, head to toe, and that's the coldest I've ever been in my life. The chief took us back to the fire station. I took a cold shower, and it felt like hot water. So I've experienced the hot, the heat, but along with the firefighting also comes sometimes medically or whatever, very cold. Okay, as far as 9/11 is concerned, I was already retired at that time, but still, just like along with firefighters, camaraderie, you had to feel the pain and what happened, and you're actually living through the experience. I did, even though I was probably, I can tell you where I was at the time, and I actually do excavating and grading, and I was on the south side of Greensboro, and I was digging a house footing, but when it happened, I could feel the pain of the buildings going down and everything, and the firefighters going in, just like military, you know, you go in and you don't know where you're coming out. So for the families and all that, I think it lay heavy on all firefighters' hearts. And a little further, a little more speaking to that 9/11 thing a little more, I've had the honor and the privilege, the memorial in front of Station 1. I actually used to work there as a firefighter, as a driver, as a captain, and after I retired, when that was implemented by some of the wives of the firefighters and everything, I actually was able to go out there and break ground on it and get rid of some of the trees and the grass that I'd mowed prior years earlier. And I was actually there from the groundbreaking all the way through the dedication. I feel honored as a result of that, and later on, even after it was done, David Griffin donated a part of the beam from the tower to the fire department, and it was on display, and I was asked to come down there and pick it up and put it back on one of the Griffin trucks, and they sandblasted it and they placed it back on some granite rock, which is there now. So I've had my hands, in a sense, on a little bit of 9/11 from New York. When I picked the beam up, it made me feel very humble and privileged to be a part of that little thing, which wasn't anything big as far as machine, but very big to me. As far as people that's helped me along the way and everything, I've always been pretty hard-headed and stubborn in mindset, but I can say this, go back military a little bit, Fort Bliss, Texas. There's a sergeant down there, and I've lived with this ever since. He said, I'm a firm believer in you learns by doing. And I've carried that through my life, and I think it plays heavily into the fire department, and you can learn from anyone and everyone. And if you eliminate any of them, there has been some people that's been more. I actually worked, I was a driver for Chief Teeters. Johnny Teeters went on to be chief of the department. I was his driver, and he kind of introduced us to a regular classroom every day. And through his being his driver, I feel that I learned a whole lot from him, and many others. There are too many to name because you learn from everyone. And just like back then, we had to learn our streets. It was no computers, and Kyle Stewart, which was our driver, was Danny Shoemake, myself, and it was always a challenge. And I felt very comfortable after I was at Station 7 because I knew all the streets. And now you got GPS and Google it up and everything, but back then it was critical that you get to the right house at the right time. So Kyle's gone, but he's still certainly a big mentor as far as some of the things I learned on the fire department. And I'm sure I'll miss a lot of them, but many more. As far as my career, I am now at working on 21 years of retirement since I left. So I'm two-thirds of the way to my full career. And if I was a young man, I'd go down again and sign up tomorrow, because I think it's a very rewarding career, and it has certainly, as a result of it, it's been good even in retirement. It's something that you can be proud of from the day you go on all the way through the end of it. Now, I'm going to add one other thing here that I'd like to put in there and how we need to do it. When I was working at Station 7, this is a story, and you may ask the question, but this is a story. I was working with Paul Brown, who was my captain, Danny Shoemate, Kyle Stewart, and Emory Green, which was an auxiliary firefighter, and Fred Lawrence was we needed water. We went to the Greensboro City landfill. We had a fire over there, and 7's first in, we responded, and we'd set up 2.5-inch hose with 1/2-inch tips. And Fred brought the tanker over there because there was no water to supply the engine, and that was probably one of my worst days, because what happened was the tanker was skipping and missing. It was a gas. Fred kept throttling it up to try to supply the residual to the engine company. The timing was what happened to all of it, but Captain Brown and Shoemate was on one line, and they had cut it off to move it. I was on the line by myself with Emory Green standing not far away, and the tanker started running the way it's supposed to, and it sent a surge to the pumper, and the pumper sent the surge to me. So what I say is, as a result, I used to be good looking, but I got hit in the face with a nozzle, a 1/2-inch nozzle, which blooded me up. My eyes would not dilate. I went through 3 surgeries as a result of it. My firefighter helmet is still laying somewhere in the landfill over there. So but I would still, what I say is I'd still do it all over again. You say the most heartbreaking, probably as far as a call or whatever, or something that happened to me. I just come on in this new career and everything, and like I say, August of '69, and before the end of that year, Jesse Gray got run over by a truck, backed over, and Lacey Nelson, which I did not know either one of them, but Lacey had a lung problem or something, so we had 2 firefighters that passed away before I even went in training. So that laid pretty heavy too. It kind of told you what was into and what the career could bring to you. If I was going to speak to a rookie, I think this day and time, and with things the way they've changed and everything, it would be hard to direct at this point with the changes. But I can tell you from my experience, and to any of them, if they want a career that's challenging, that's rewarding, that you can look back on and say, I've been there and done that, and I've done good deeds for a lot of people as a public employee or a public safety person that wants to help people, then this is the opportunity and the career that you should look towards. And I can relate back to a little bit and talk about fire versus police or whatever. Police officers generally don't want to fight fire. Firefighters don't want to dodge bullets. And this is something you would have to be kind of oriented towards going into unknown buildings and everything. If I was going to talk about anything we hadn't talked here, I guess the question was asked about some of the things that's happened and the people that I've worked with, and showing their appreciation. And I'd like to make mention of the little red box I have over here, which you'll take a picture of. When I was at station number 1, and if I can't remember all of the people that was on my company, but I was called Captain Whip. So we get back to a nickname here, I guess. And my driver, if I remember correctly, was Steve Stone, and I believe Chris Bowman was also on the company. And there's a couple that I've tried to pull up in my mind, but my memory won't let me do it. But I'd like to speak to this. At Christmas time, or when I left, they give me a little trophy here, and it's actually the door facings off around the door, and it's built kind of triangular like. And they went through the trouble of going and getting some plastic Indians and cowboys, and they trimmed them and painted them up like firefighters, and they put them on different levels. And one of the cowboys had a lasso that they cut off the loop off to make it look like a whip. And the other three, they stood down front with their hands up in the air, and they painted little red marks on them where I had took the whip and cut the blood out of them to make them mine or whatever. So they gave that to me from station or engine number 1 B shift, and there'll be a picture of it. The other thing, another nickname I didn't speak to, or what they kidded me about when I came on, and I'll do a quick, since I'm on video here. I had a lot of kinky hair back then or whatever. Growing up on the farm, we didn't even know what a comb was. And that carries on, so I don't have that problem anymore. But back then, they told me, these guys told me, or accused me of combing my hair with a firecracker. So over there in the box, along with the Captain Whip thing, I got the same time as a pocket comb, and they took the teeth out of ever so often, and they got a line of firecrackers, and they're on the teeth. So I can actually light them probably and comb my hair with it if I had any at this point. So that's something that I have carried with me and remembered and kind of safeguarded over the years. So we go back to the early 80s, and actually I had the privilege of making the first fire call out of the new Station 1. Engine 3 went 10-7 and became Engine 1, and Engine 2 came from old Central Station, and Engine 1 had already been put out of service and became the new Engine 16 at that time. So Lonnie Smith, Chuck Smith, was a driver on Engine 2, and I was a driver on Engine 1. So the territories was out of the station, new station, left towards town was Chuck Smith's, and to the right was Engine 1, which was me. And our first call was actually to, I think, Flint Street, which was a receptacle that was smoking in the wall, and we all responded. And when we got there, it's kind of played down, but while we was there, it was dispatched a apartment fire in the middle of July, if I remember correctly, and it was really hot, and it was on Barclay Street. I think I got that right. And it was a rip roar from one end to the other. So that was our first experience on day number 1 of what is Central Station, Fire Station 1 on Church Street right now. Okay, in reference to the training tower they just tore down, working with Chief Cockman and Harold here, I pretty readily volunteered to capture as many of these bricks from the old training tower, and at this point I am cleaning them up and everything, making them available to retirees or anybody else that's interested in it or whatever. So I've captured quite a few of them. So if you do have a desire for a keepsake or whatever, then you can get in touch with myself or Chief Cockman or Harold or whatever, and we'll make one available to you. I probably got about as many brick right now available after we finish the process as we did firefighters when I came on. So they're there for the asking or whatever, and we'll make them available. Okay, the tower was built, I think, in 1955 and 1956. I stand corrected. So it's got a lot of history to it, and even outside the Greensboro Fire Department, there's been many rural fire departments has also done training at this, and I think anybody that's retired or whatever, if a keepsake we'll make it available.
We hope you enjoyed watching these documentaries. It was our goal to share and preserve the memories of our retired Greensboro firefighters. It is our desire that these documentaries will inspire future generations to continue the brotherhood, sisterhood, and camaraderie while always striving for excellence in their careers. While fire apparatus, equipment, and technology have improved, several things will always remain the same. The courage and bravery it takes to mitigate natural and man-made disasters will always be a part of the job. Although our retirees are no longer a physical part of the GFD world, a giant piece of each retiree's memories have been shared with you today. These memories will be in their hearts and minds forever. A special thank you goes out to Captain Harold Haney for his many long hours of recording and editing. Thank you, Harold. A job well done.